It was a quiet Sunday morning in Maplewood Heights, a small, beautiful neighborhood where everything looked perfect. The houses stood in neat lines, the grass was always green, and the people liked to follow every single rule. The Homeowners Association, also known as the HOA, made sure of that. Everyone in the neighborhood knew Karen Miller, the strict head of the HOA. She was the kind of person who noticed every little thing a trash bin left outside. A flower planted an inch too far, or a car parked slightly over the white line. To her, rules were everything, and she believed she was the guardian of the neighborhood that morning. Karen was standing by her window, holding her cup of coffee, when she noticed a black SUV pulling into the parking area. It stopped right in front of Building 3, a reserved space marked Resident 304. She didn't recognize the car or the man who stepped out. The man looked calm, dressed neatly in a dark suit even though it was the weekend. His name was Marcus Brown. He had just moved into the neighborhood. He was quiet, respectful, and carried himself with confidence. But to Karen, he was a stranger, and in her eyes, strangers didn't belong. Without a second thought, Karen marched outside, her phone already recording. "Excuse me," she shouted, her voice echoing across the parking lot. "You can't park here. This is private property. Only residents are allowed to park in this area." Marcus turned to her politely. "Good morning, ma'am." But before he could finish, Karen interrupted. "Don't lie to me. I know everyone who lives here. You need to move your car before I call the police." Marcus took a slow breath. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't look angry. He simply reached into his pocket and pulled out his house key. "I live in 344, he said gently. Karen laughed in disbelief. "Oh, sure you do. You people always have excuses." Her tone was sharp, filled with judgment. The few neighbors watching from their porches began whispering. Some looked uncomfortable, but no one stepped forward. Marcus calmly repeated, "This is my assigned parking spot." Karen moved closer, still holding her phone in his face. "I've seen enough of this nonsense. I'm calling the HOA and the police. You'll regret trying to sneak around here." Marcus didn't argue. He just looked at her for a moment, quiet, thoughtful, as if he was used to this kind of situation. Then he turned and started unloading a few boxes from his car. Karen's face turned red with anger. "You're ignoring me? That's it," she shouted, walking away furiously. From behind her, Marcus simply said, "Have a nice day." "Ma'am," it was a short sentence, but it hit hard. Calm, yet powerful. As Karen stormed back to her house, she began typing a long message to the HOA chat group. Within minutes, messages started pouring in. "Who is this man? Did someone rent out 304? We should check with the management." The next morning, Maplewood Heights was buzzing with whispers. What had started as a short argument in the parking lot had turned into the main topic of every small conversation. Karen's video of Marcus had already spread through the neighborhood chat group. In the clip, Marcus looked calm, but Karen's voice was sharp and loud. Her caption read, "Unknown man caught parking illegally. Possible trespasser. Be careful, neighbors." People reacted quickly. Some agreed with Karen, while others asked questions. "Who is he?" one message said. "Maybe he's new," another replied. Karen answered fast. "No one informed me about any new move-ins. He's suspicious." Within hours, almost everyone in the community had seen the video. Some even drove by Building 3 just to get a look at Marcus's car. Meanwhile, Marcus had no idea his face was already famous in the neighborhood. He was inside his apartment, unpacking boxes and arranging files on his desk. His life had always been private, quiet and focused. He didn't like attention, especially not this kind. Later that afternoon, Marcus walked outside with a small box of books. He waved to a neighbor, an older man watering his plants. The man hesitated for a moment before giving a short nod. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Marcus noticed it, but he didn't react. He just kept walking. From a distance, behind her curtain, Karen was watching again. She had made it her duty to observe everything Marcus did. She took notes, snapped pictures, and sent updates to the HOA group. At 6 p.m., an HOA message appeared in everyone's inbox. "Emergency meeting tomorrow. Topic: parking violations and neighborhood security. Karen smiled to herself. Let's see what story he gives tomorrow, she whispered. That evening, Marcus sat on his porch reading a newspaper. The sun was setting, and everything looked peaceful. But the peace didn't last long. Two young neighbors walked by, whispering to each other. Marcus overheard one say, "That's the guy Karen was talking about." He looked up, smiled kindly, and said, "Good evening." He froze for a second, then quickly said, "Evening," and hurried away. Marcus sighed. He had seen this before, judgment without reason. It wasn't new to him, but it still hurt. As night fell, Karen was busy making phone calls. She called the HOA vice president, Mrs. Jensen, saying, "We can't let strangers just move in without approval. Who knows what kind of people they are?" Mrs. Jensen sounded unsure. "Karen, maybe he did move in legally." "Did you check with the management?" Karen replied sharply, "I don't need to. I know when something isn't right." The next morning, the tension grew. Marcus went to the parking lot to leave for work. As he approached his car, he saw something unusual, a folded note under his wiper. He opened it and read the words written in red ink, "You don't belong here." He stood still for a moment. The calm expression on his face didn't change. But his eyes looked tired, like he had seen this kind of hate many times before. He folded the note and placed it in his pocket. Then he looked around. A few curtains moved as neighbors quickly pulled back as Marcus drove away. Karen stood by her window, arms crossed, a proud smile on her face. "Maybe now he'll think twice before pretending to live here," she said softly. But what she didn't know was that Marcus was not going to run away. He was used to pressure, used to being judged, used to people underestimating him. He had faced tougher battles inside real courtrooms where justice was decided. And soon, the same calm man she mocked would show everyone that justice wasn't limited to the courthouse. In the quiet streets of Maplewood Heights, the story was just beginning to turn. The rumor had begun. Meanwhile, Marcus quietly entered his apartment. Inside, the place was almost empty. Just a few boxes, a laptop bag, and a framed photo on the counter. The photo showed him shaking hands with a group of people in formal suits. He placed the frame gently on the shelf and looked out the window, watching Karen pacing outside, still on her phone. He smiled slightly, not with pride, but with patience. No one in Maplewood Heights knew who Marcus Brown really was. To them, he was just another new neighbor, maybe someone renting, maybe someone who didn't fit their picture of perfection. But in truth, Marcus was a federal judge, a man who had spent years fighting for justice, equality, and fairness. And soon, this quiet neighborhood would learn what that really meant. The scene faded out with Karen muttering to herself, "He picked the wrong place to mess with." But little did she know, she had just picked a fight with a man who understood the law better than anyone else. The morning sun touched the quiet streets of Maplewood Heights, but peace didn't last long. Karen Miller was already outside, standing with her hands on her hips, watching Marcus's car again. It had become her daily routine to look, to judge, to complain. Marcus stepped out of his apartment, holding a small watering can. He had decided to plant a few flowers near his porch. Nothing big. Just a little color to make his new home feel alive. But for Karen, even that looked like a violation. She took a quick photo and whispered to herself, "He's breaking HOA rules again." Marcus kneeled down, gently placing the flowers into the soil. His movements were calm and patient. He hummed softly, a habit he had when he wanted peace. Suddenly, Karen's sharp voice cut through the air. "Excuse me? What do you think you're doing?" Marcus looked up, wiping his hands. "Just planting a few flowers, ma'am. I thought it would look nice." Karen folded her arms. "This area is community property. You can't just do whatever you want. You people never follow the rules." Marcus stood up slowly, his face calm but serious. "I checked the HOA guidebook. Small personal gardens are allowed by each entrance." Karen scoffed. "Don't try to act smart with me. I run this place." "You're trespassing again." She pulled out her phone and began recording. "Look at this. He's destroying community property," she said loudly, hoping neighbors would hear. Marcus didn't respond. He simply turned back to his plants. That made her angrier. "Fine," she shouted. "If you won't listen, I'll call the police right now." Marcus paused, looked at her and said quietly, "Do what you think is right." Within minutes, 2 police cars arrived. The sirens broke the silence of the peaceful neighborhood. Doors opened, and officers stepped out. Neighbors gathered near their windows, whispering again. Some recorded from a distance. Karen waved to the officers, pointing at Marcus. "That's him. He's been breaking HOA rules and refusing to leave. He's not supposed to be here." The officers turned to Marcus. "Sir, can we talk to you for a second?" Marcus nodded politely. "Of course." He wiped his hands and walked over slowly. One officer said, "We received a call about a disturbance." "Are you a resident here?" "Yes," Marcus replied. He reached into his pocket and handed them his ID and residency papers. "I just moved in 2 weeks ago." Apartment 304. The officers looked at his documents, then at each other. Something changed in their expressions. One of them cleared his throat. Thank you, sir." "Everything seems fine." Karen frowned. "What do you mean fine?" "He's lying." "Check his car?" "His papers, anything." The officer turned to her calmly. "Ma'am, we verified his ID. He's a legal resident. There's no violation here." Karen's voice grew sharper. "You don't understand." "He's been," the other officer interrupted, his tone firm now. "Ma'am, please stop. You've wasted police time on a false report. This is a civil matter, not a criminal one." Karen's mouth fell open. "What? You're taking his side?" Marcus remained silent, standing tall, his eyes calm but confident. The officers nodded to him politely before leaving as they drove away. Karen's face turned red with frustration. She shouted after them, "This isn't over." Marcus looked at her and said softly, "I hope not, ma'am. Sometimes the truth takes time." Then he walked back to his flowers, leaving Karen speechless. That evening, the neighborhood was unusually quiet. People who had once believed Karen started to doubt her. The police visit had embarrassed her, and rumors began to turn. Inside his apartment, Marcus sat by the window, watching the lights fade. He took out his phone, opened an email, and typed a few words. "I might need to file a formal complaint. Documentation attached." He hit send. The camera lingered on his calm face, the face of a man who had handled bigger storms before. Outside, Karen sat in her car, staring at his apartment, gripping her phone tightly. "Who is he?" she muttered, but the answer was something she wasn't ready to hear. 2 days passed after the police incident. But the tension in Maplewood Heights only grew stronger. Karen Miller had become quiet, but only on the outside. Inside, her anger burned even hotter. She couldn't stop thinking about how those officers had spoken to her, how they had suddenly changed their tone after seeing Marcus's ID. Something about him didn't make sense. Who was this man who made even the police act so carefully? She sat at her kitchen table, scrolling through her phone. On one side of the screen was Marcus's calm face from the video she had taken. On the other side, a blank search bar. She typed his name, Marcus Brown. So many results appeared that she frowned. "Too many Marcus Browns," she muttered. She tried adding law, then city, then court. Suddenly, one result caught her eye, a newspaper article with the headline, "Judge Marcus Brown, honored for his service in federal court." Her eyes widened. She clicked it, but her internet glitched for a second, and the article didn't open. Karen laughed nervously. "No, it can't be him," she said aloud. "It's probably someone else with the same name." Still, her heart started to beat faster. That afternoon, a letter arrived in her mailbox, official-looking, printed on crisp white paper. The sender's name read, Maplewood Heights HOA Legal Department. Karen tore it open quickly. Her hands froze when she read the first line. "This letter serves as notice of a formal complaint filed against you for harassment and misuse of HOA authority." Mouth dropped open. "What? Against me?" She kept reading, and there it was again. Marcus's name, signed at the bottom. Her face turned pale. In a rush of anger, she grabbed the letter and stormed out of her house. Her feet carried her straight toward Marcus's apartment. When she reached his door, she didn't even knock. She just started yelling. "Mr. Brown, open the door right now. How dare you file a complaint against me? Do you know who I am?" The door opened slowly. Marcus stood there, calm as ever, wearing a plain white shirt and reading glasses. "Good evening, Ms. Miller," he said softly. Karen waved the letter in his face. "You think you can scare me with this nonsense? You don't belong here. I'll have you removed by the board." Marcus looked at her, silent for a moment, then said, "I didn't mean to scare you, ma'am. I just followed the process. Everyone has the right to peace. Peace." Karen laughed harshly. "You're a troublemaker. You think those flowers make you look innocent?" He smiled faintly. "Sometimes flowers say more than words." She stepped closer. "Don't talk in riddles. Who are you really?" Marcus tilted his head, his eyes calm but deep. "You'll find out soon enough." "The HOA meeting is tomorrow, isn't it?" Karen blinked. "How do you know that?" He simply smiled again. "I read the notice." Then he closed the door gently, leaving Karen standing there in confusion and rage. That night, Karen couldn't sleep. Her mind kept replaying every word, every calm look Marcus gave her. Why wasn't he afraid? Why didn't he shout back? Meanwhile, inside his apartment, Marcus sat by his desk, opening a black leather folder. Inside were documents, legal papers, and a small badge, the kind that carried weight. The badge read, "Federal Judge, United States District Court." He looked at it for a moment, sighed, then placed it back carefully. His phone buzzed, a message from someone named Agent Daniels. "Will handle the HOA case as discussed. Proceed with calm." Marcus typed back, "Always." Outside, the moonlight fell on his window. His face was peaceful, but his eyes showed a quiet sadness, the kind of sadness that comes from years of seeing injustice repeated in small ways. Even in ordinary places, Karen, on the other hand, stood by her window. Staring at his apartment across the street, she whispered to herself, "Tomorrow, I'll expose him. No one humiliates me in my own neighborhood." But what she didn't realize was that she wasn't the one about to expose. Marcus was the one about to expose her. The truth was coming, and Maplewood Heights was about to witness something it had never seen before. The next evening, the community hall of Maplewood Heights was full. The long wooden table was surrounded by the HOA members, and almost every resident had shown up to watch. Whispered voices filled the room like a low hum. At the center sat Karen Miller, tapping her pen loudly against the table. Her smile looked forced, but her eyes were full of pride. She believed this was her moment, the meeting that would end Marcus Brown's stay once and for all. At exactly 6 o'clock, the door opened and Marcus walked in. He wore a dark suit, simple but sharp. His calm expression didn't change as every eye turned toward him. Karen leaned back and whispered to the vice president, "He'll beg to stay." Marcus quietly took a seat near the end of the table. He greeted everyone with a polite nod, then folded his hands on the table. The HOA president, Mr. Lopez, cleared his throat. "We're here to discuss several complaints regarding property conduct and HOA violations," he said, glancing at the papers in front of him. "Ms. Miller, since you filed the report, please begin." Karen stood up immediately. Her voice carried across the hall. "Thank you, Mr. Lopez. It's simple, really. This man," she pointed dramatically at Marcus, "moved in without proper notice, parked illegally, broke garden rules, and has been disrespectful to the HOA. A few residents nodded. Others looked unsure. Karen continued, "He's refused to cooperate. Even the police had to be called. This neighborhood has always been peaceful, and we don't need outsiders who can't follow rules." There was silence for a moment. Then, Mr. Lopez turned to Marcus. "Mr. Brown, would you like to respond?" Marcus stood up slowly. His calm voice filled the room. "I appreciate the chance to speak, Mr. Lopez. I moved here because I wanted a quiet place to live. I followed every rule written in the HOA manual. The parking spot I use is registered to apartment 304. My apartment. He reached into his folder and handed a few documents to the board. These are the lease papers and HOA approvals signed by management. Karen frowned. Paperwork can be forged, she said quickly. Marcus looked at her, his tone still polite. You're right. Which is why I've also included the HOA confirmation email sent by you, Ms. Miller, 3 weeks ago. Her face froze. A few people turned to her, whispering. Marcus continued. I've tried to be kind. I ignored the insults. I didn't react when the police were called. But what happened next crossed the line. He pulled out a small plastic bag. Inside was the note he had found on his car, the one that said, "You don't belong here." A quiet gasp spread through the room. Marcus placed it on the table. I received this after your public post accusing me of being a criminal. Karen's voice trembled slightly. I never wrote that. Marcus nodded slowly. Maybe not the note, but your actions started it. You turned a peaceful community into a place of fear. Mr. Lopez looked uncomfortable. This is serious, Ms. Miller. Karen tried to regain control. This is ridiculous. You're twisting everything. Who do you think you are? Marcus paused for a moment. Then he reached into his folder one last time and placed a small black badge on the table. The room went silent. He said quietly, I am Judge Marcos Brown, United States Federal Court. No one spoke. The only sound was Karen's pen dropping from her hand. Marcus continued, his voice steady but firm. I moved here to live like any normal citizen without special treatment. But what I experienced was something no one should face. Judgment without reason, disrespect without cause. His words were simple, but they hit hard. Several people lowered their heads, ashamed. Karen's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her face had lost all color. Marcus looked around the room. Rules are meant to protect people, not to be used as weapons against them. If this neighborhood truly believes in fairness, then it's time to act like it. Mr. Lopez nodded slowly. You're absolutely right, Judge Brown. He turned to Karen. Ms. Miller, your behavior has violated HOA ethics. Effective immediately, you are removed from your position. The room erupted in quiet murmurs. Karen sat down, stunned, unable to speak. Marcus simply picked up his badge, placed it back in his folder and said, Thank you for your time. Then he turned and walked out of the hall as he left. Everyone watched in silence, realizing they had misjudged a man who had only wanted peace. The night after the meeting, Maplewood Heights was unusually quiet. For the first time in weeks, no one was gossiping, no one was arguing. The air itself felt different, lighter, yet heavy with realization inside his apartment. Judge Marcus Brown sat by the window, sipping tea and looking out at the parking lot. The same spot where it had all started, the same place where he had been insulted, accused, and recorded like a criminal. Now, it was peaceful again. He closed his eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. There was no anger in him, no bitterness, just a calm silence, the kind that comes only after a storm has passed. Across the street, Karen Miller sat in her living room, her phone buzzing nonstop. Messages poured in, some from neighbors apologizing for believing her, others from HOA members asking her to return her keys. She didn't reply to any of them. Her pride, which once stood tall, now felt like a heavy chain around her neck. She looked at the mirror and hardly recognized herself. The woman staring back looked tired, not from age, but from the weight of her own arrogance. The next morning, Marcus stepped outside to check his mail. The sun was soft, and the air smelled of fresh grass. He saw a small box lying near his door. No name, just a note attached to it. I'm sorry. I opened the box and found a single white rose inside. No signature, but he didn't need one. He smiled quietly, knowing who it came from. Later that day, several neighbors approached him for the first time, not with suspicion, but with kindness. Good morning, Judge Brown, one said shyly. He nodded warmly. Just Marcus is fine, he replied. Even the children waved to him now when he walked by. The same people who once looked at him with doubt were now offering smiles and small conversations. The neighborhood was learning that evening. HOA gathered once more, not for judgment this time, but for reflection. Mr. Lopez, the president, stood before the group. We've learned a valuable lesson, he began. We must never let prejudice blind us again. Judge Brown reminded us that respect is not earned by status. It's owed to every human being. Marcus was invited to speak, but he refused the microphone. He simply stood and said, "Thank you. I didn't want to be treated as a judge here. I only wanted to be treated as a neighbor." It was silence, not awkward but meaningful. Everyone understood. After the meeting, Karen quietly approached him in the hallway. Her voice trembled. "Mr. Judge Brown," she began. "I wanted to say," he interrupted softly. "You don't need to." Tears filled her eyes. "I was wrong. I let my assumptions speak louder than my heart. I'm sorry." Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "Forgiveness is not for the other person. It's for peace." He smiled, a small, genuine smile. "Let's both find that peace." Karen nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered. As she walked away, Marcus looked up at the sky. The sunset painted the neighborhood in gold and orange. He remembered something his father once told him. Sometimes justice isn't about punishment, it's about teaching. He finally understood that those words weren't just for the courtroom. They were for life. Marcus walked to his car and paused for a moment, staring at the parking spot that had started it all. The same space that had brought hate now stood as a symbol of respect. He got inside, started the engine, and smiled. Across the street, Karen stood by her window, watching quietly, not with anger, but with regret and a small spark of humility. The camera panned up, showing the peaceful neighborhood once more, children playing, neighbors talking, birds singing. The narrator's voice spoke softly. "Never judge someone by what you see. Behind every face is a story. Behind every story is a truth. And sometimes, the people we underestimate the most are the ones who teach us what humanity really means."